I'll do the intro here after the recording. Welcome to the August 26th, 2022 meeting of the Rural Resilience and Adaptation Subcommittee. How's everybody doing?
Thumbs up, that's good.
Well, we have a compact, but I think meaty agenda today. So we will get right into that. And also the minutes from our last meeting are posted on or linked to the agenda. So we will talk about, we've been asked to discuss FY24 budget priorities, and the council is looking for some recommendations from us as the subcommittees to lift up to them. And then we will talk about some changes with subcommittee composition and some meeting schedule moving forward. Are there any additions to the agenda that folks want to add? Catherine, I'll hand it to you if you have any opening comments. In addition
yeah, just check to see if anybody had any comments or questions on the minutes that were attached. If not, we'll go ahead and consider those accepted. I see a nod from Anne. That sounds good. Great, thank you. And it's nice to see everybody after a summer hiatus.
Would it be okay if we just did a quick round of intros? Because
I think it would be helpful.
Yeah, because at our May meeting, we approved a number of new folks, and this is our first actual meeting since then. So why don't we go through and just quick your name and where you are from in Vermont, and then what area you're representing. And I'll go first. I'm Erica Borneman. I'm the Director of Vermont Emergency Management, and I am the Commissioner of Public Safety designee to the Climate Council. So I am one of the administration co-chairs. And Catherine, I'll hand it to you, and then we can kind of go in the line with everybody.
Sounds great. I'm Catherine Dimitrick. I'm Executive Director of Northwest Regional Planning Commission, and I am one of the House Speaker's appointments to the Climate Council. And I'll pass it over to Marion.
Hi, everyone. Marion Woles. I work for the Agency of Natural Resources. Currently, my role is Global Warming Solutions Act Coordinator, but I'm transitioning to a role as Adaptation and Resilience Coordinator within the newly formed Climate Action Office. I'll pass it to Anne.
Hi, my name is Anne Lawless. I live in Wheelock. I'm not exactly sure how I got on, what my official role is, but I'm chair of the select board in Wheelock, and I also work for Heat Squad. We do home energy audits, and I'm the outreach coordinator for the Northeast Kingdom. And I will pass it to Alice.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alice Peel. I live in Waitsfield, and right now I am the chair of the Waitsfield Planning Commission. Oh, and I need to pass it to someone. I'll pass it to Megan.
Hello, my name is Megan Rausch. I live in Northfield, and I'm a community development underwriter for Vermont Housing Finance Agency. And I'll pass it to, sorry, I am actually on the road, so I can't see everyone right now. If someone could pass it for me, that would be wonderful.
Chad, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, great. Yeah, my name is Chad Farrell. I'm the founder and CEO of Encore Renewable Energy. And I am the Senate's designee representing the clean energy sector. It's good to see everybody again. I'm sorry I missed the last meeting. I was out of town. And I will pass it to Mike.
Thanks, Chad. Hi, everybody. I am Mike Burke. I live in South Burlington, Vermont. I work and lead the field teams at Green Mountain Power who respond to storms like the ones we're watching today. I feel like every time we have a meeting, we're having thunderstorms, which is good. Maybe we pick a different day. I represent the utility industry here with a heavy reliance on the electrical sector of that. Thank you. And I will pass it on to Ann Margolis.
Hi there, Ann Margolis. I'm the Deputy Director of Planning at the Vermont Public Service Department, which puts out the Comprehensive Energy Plan, and we work on electric sector regulation. And I live in Corinth, where I'm also on the Planning Commission here as well. And I'll pass it on to Andrea.
Hi, everyone. I'm Andrea Wright. I work for the Agency of Transportation. I'm the Environmental Policy Manager there. And I'm kind of filling in for Joe Segali's role on the committee since he has retired. Nice to be here. Thank you. Oh, I have to pass it. Let's go to Bronwyn.
Hi all, I'm Bronwyn Cook. I'm a Community Planning and Policy Manager in the Agency of Commerce and Community Development in the Department of Housing and Community Development. Oh, and I am in, sorry, I'm in Barrie. Also, might hear some thunder in the background, and I will pass it to David. Have you gone yet?
Nope. David Grass, Vermont Department of Health. I'm technical staff helping to support the work of the subcommittee, and I will pass it to my colleague, Jared Ulmer.
Hi everyone, Jared Ulmer. I manage the Climate and Health Program at the Department of Health, and I support the Climate Toolkit Task Group. And I will pass to Mason.
Hey everyone, I'm Mason Overstreet. I apologize for not being on camera. I have a bad internet connection today. I live in East Barnard, Vermont. I am a staff attorney at Conservation Law Foundation. I work on climate resilience, water and air issues, both statewide and regionally. I'm not on this subcommittee, but I really enjoy engaging and helping out how I can, and look forward to listening in. And I will pass it. Jane, have you gone?
I haven't. Thanks. And I too apologize for not being on camera, but I'm trying to transition from home into the office for something this afternoon. So Jane Lazorchek, like Marian, I'm in a space of transition where I was the director of the Global Warming Solutions Act over the last year and a half. And I'm working with Marian and others to stand up the Climate Action Office within the Agency of Natural Resources, and may transition to direct that office and that work. So I'm here supporting all of you and look forward to catching up on the work of the subcommittee. And I'll pass it. I see Ben Rose on my screen, so I don't think he's gone.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ben Rose. I live in Williston, and I'm the last kid picked. I'm also in day 3 of COVID, so yeah, been a rough week. I am the Recovery and Mitigation Section Chief at Vermont Emergency Management, so our FEMA whisperer, as I like to say. And I'm staff support to this working group. And there's nobody else left. Did we miss anyone? No, okay.
I don't think so. I'll pass on that I did hear from Dave Snedeker from Northeast Vermont Development Association, who is a member of this subcommittee, but unable to be here today because he has COVID too. So I'm not really up for meeting. Marian?
I was just going to add that the youth member appointed to this subcommittee, Miriam, sends her regrets, but it's her first day of school, so she's not able to make it today.
Well, that's excusable.
Yeah.
Oh, and then I see we have Matthew that just joined. Matthew, we're doing introductions. Hi again. If you want to introduce yourself.
Yes. Greetings, everyone. My name is Matthew LaFleur from Albert, Vermont and Grand Isle County. Welcome.
Thanks, Matthew.
Okay, well, I think we can move on to our next agenda item. So, like I said at the beginning of our meeting, the administration is working on budget development for FY24, And so the council is going to be interested to hear from the subcommittees on areas of funding priority that we would like to see established in support of the Climate Council's work and of course the subcommittee work. So we wanted to have a roundtable discussion with folks here to kind of build some consensus around where we would recommend that the council recommends that the administration prioritize funding in support of our work. So I'm gonna open it up. We do have a number of ongoing projects, so maybe we start there in terms of our discussion. But I do want to just open it up to see, based on the agenda and based on what I said, did that trigger anything for anybody as it relates to where we should be supporting existing initiatives or new initiatives on the part of the Rural Resilience and Adaptation Subcommittee.
Erica, may I just for 1 minute? It's Jane.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I thought I would just share that I feel like a little badly about the timing on this and the process, and just want to suggest that the steering committee working over the summer was lifting up and thinking about what their work is for the fall and preparing for the council meetings. But it was really, it became apparent only recently that in order to form the governor's budget, that the recommendations from the council, similar to what were prepared for ARPA last year, but in a memo that would go to the governor and the heads of appropriate legislative committees, most would be best timed if they went up to the governor at the same time as agency recommendations were. And that meant for the deadline for agencies to respond to the governor is October 11th. And so the timing went fast, and the idea was that at the September council meetings, if subcommittees wanted to weigh in, that co-chairs could lift up a suite of ideas. At the same time, ANR would put forward a memo around capacity, as well as our ongoing technical support that overlaps and dovetails with the work of the council, to demonstrate the work that we're doing, and then think and be able to launch looking forward at how we can set a target and a priority so that subcommittees have something to refine down between September and October. And hopefully the council would be able to approve a suite of priorities tied to funding recommendations that would be approved at their October meeting. So this was really intended to be sort of a throwing spaghetti at the wall, for lack of a better process, to think really about the ongoing work of this subcommittee. What are the focus areas, and is additional funding needed to continue to advance that? And obviously your subcommittee has some important work happening, one of which I would say is funded for now, which is the Municipal Vulnerability Index, and then 2, the Climate Action Toolkit, which perhaps could use additional resources to help leverage. And I would ask Marian to speak to that. But those are the 2 big sort of tangible task projects that are moving forward. And then it'd be important to think about other initiatives that you might want to lift up from there.
Well, thanks for providing a bit more context, Jane. So just to reinforce that, did you say that this will result in a letter from the council to go directly to the governor and not necessarily rolled up in like ANR's budget proposal?
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So just speaking of those 2 ongoing initiatives, on the Municipal Vulnerability Index, I can't immediately recall to what extent or to what scope of work that work is already funded. Is that something that you can speak to, or do we need to outline that, in FY23, we expect that work to begin with our contract support, and that in FY24, we'll need to ensure that we have funding to really carry out the intent of the law as it relates to developing an index as well as assessing municipalities against that index to ensure that we have a good understanding of vulnerability at a town by town level throughout Vermont.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the task group, we had 5 excellent proposals, any of which really could have done the job. We narrowed it in on 2 sort of top candidates and asked for some follow-up. We've selected the top consultant that we are now in negotiation on with the contract. We've gone back and forth a little bit on scope of work. And so just because we're negotiating the contract, I won't say who it is, but we are really close to signing the contract, and I think the whole task group felt really excited about all of the proposals and then who we finally are moving forward with. And that will see us all the way through this spring and the development of the tool, a robust stakeholder process to inform the development of the tool, and then actually the building of the tool and index. And so maybe in fiscal year 24, thinking about how to roll out the tool and what further work needs to happen with that from this subcommittee would be a great space to think about.
And one of the things we had put in the original recommendation for use of some ARPA funds was the development of some sort of grant program or funding for municipalities to actually implement projects to address their vulnerabilities that were identified in this municipal vulnerability analysis. So that's something that I would throw out there that we should consider whether we want to include a recommendation like that again.
Would that be using the town's ARPA money or?
No, it wouldn't. And I don't think we need to, it wouldn't be suggesting to towns how they should spend their money. I think towns already get enough suggestions from people about that. But it would be more like of a statewide need to really figure out how we can put resources toward those communities that are identified as most vulnerable.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. At least how I envision it.
Yeah, so like Jane said, we will get through, the end of FY23, and it sounds like we're funded through the end of FY23 for the tool development, but applying that tool to towns and doing it in a way that is personable is probably even more complex, and will require a lot more hands-on, face-to-face interaction with towns potentially. Or potentially not. I think it depends on what the tool is and how easily you can use existing data to just extrapolate certain conclusions about the vulnerability of every town.
Well, that will be included in this analysis is the actual, it's not just like an index, it's the actual applying of it to the municipalities.
You mean so the project will cover the application of the index to the, and that's in FY23. So then what we're possibly talking about is the rollout of the results of the tool and what that
Like,
means.
what does that mean to you? If Anne's looking at this as select board chair, what does she do with that? And what resources are available to help address those vulnerabilities?
Ben?
Yes, I remember early in the meetings of this working group, encouraging us for this committee to be a strong advocate for the Flood Resilient Communities Fund, which does now have ARPA funding for the first few years. And one of our desired outcomes, I think, is to have the Flood Resilient Community Fund as a state-funded hazard mitigation program to provide a resource for communities to address their flood resiliency needs going forward. So I think it's a really powerful tool. We're already using it. We already have success stories, and trying to lock that in as a tool that we'll have in the future is important.
And I think then, it's important to point out that The FRCF, as it stands now, is kind of a two-part program. One, it uses ARPA money to fully fund hazard mitigation projects, but two, it uses $8 million of general fund transfer money to fund match for federal hazard mitigation programs. We are hoping we will obligate almost $15 million in ARPA money that was appropriated for FY23 in FY23. But there's really no plan beyond that to fund at a state level hazard mitigation projects. From the match perspective for federal hazard mitigation projects, we think we will burn through that match pot over the course of probably 2 or 2.5 fiscal years. And then after that, we will continue to make the case that we really need to have a state level match source for federal hazard mitigation projects, because without that, you really don't have ability for especially small towns to access federal hazard mitigation money without the additional help. So I think there's an idea on the table from Catherine related to FY24 potentially identifying funding or a funding source to develop a grant, some sort of funding opportunity that would allow towns to address the vulnerabilities that are outlined in the vulnerability assessment. What do folks think about that? Mike?
The old fashioned raise the hand, sorry. What I wonder about that is, will that include, Ben mentions flooding, so will that include V-Trans, or is that only going to be town type things? In the same with energy, right? Does it include, does it get up to a higher level where the energy or resilience of lines may be more than just that town? You know what I mean? Like, where are those different buckets?
Yeah.
Who funds V-Trans? In other words, who may fund resiliency projects on the electrical grid? Will that come from town recommendations, or will there be a kind of a second tier set of recommendations? And should we recommend that? I guess that's what I'm wondering.
I see those as really separate things, Mike, and I would support a recommendation of attention being paid to resilience and adaptation funding at the state level under the state agencies and in cooperation with our utilities. What I saw in last year's legislative session was a lot of people advocating for state level funding, and the municipalities for whom much of this implementation is placed upon not really getting any additional attention except for one program for fuel switching. So to me, it suggests a separate call out for that, but I would support both.
Anne?
I think it's also really important that there be some help for small towns to raise awareness about this opportunity and to provide support to help them access the funds. And I also think that in many small towns, housing, it just may not be a big focus of town government, and select boards may not think that housing is really important part of the town's responsibility. So I'm not sure what is the best way to address that, because a lot of the vulnerabilities that are going to be identified are probably going to be having to do with housing, in addition to, the normal stuff like roads and bridges and flooding, and that affects the sort of the more standard infrastructure, which boils down to roads largely, at least in the tiny towns.
And I'm glad you brought that up, and it reminds me that we have in the climate action plan several recommendations for funding for different things, one of them being technical assistance to help those smaller under-resourced towns. And we should probably pull those up to look at what we recommended in the plan for funding. I see Matthew and then Marion. Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Did you want to add anything, Erica?
No, I was just going to say we had a hand up from Matthew and then a hand up from Marion.
Okay, this is Matthew. Greetings. Yeah, to go on to those questions, equity. Yes, I'm going to answer that question that she has said before because that's easy for me. Is what are we not doing now? That's the point. It's we have 252 towns around and across the state of Vermont. That it seems like there's a focus on certain towns and not all. And it's basically getting at the heart of inequity. And for my town, it's just putting so forth, as we got teams, wondering what we're going to do with the ARPA funds we have with our town, systems, and the way I look at this is, one is, trying to reconnect, with government, of Vermont to actually understand that, you have to come down to the ground level to see these communities in action, what's going on around them, because you won't be able to get that information if you don't go to them. And with, like I said, with technology and time and possibility of, trying to outreach to these communities that are, far and wide between the two, it's like, these systems that we have in place is, we're trying to get at the need and wants of what the system wants, but the system also is so complex, interconnection agencies and interconnections with the technology and system we have in Vermont. It's just, Vermont in general is a complex system, so we have to navigate through this. But I think for me, it would be for an advocacy or for an advocate standpoint, would be actually call up those communities, those 252 communities that we have in Vermont, and see what they see on a ground level, because that's the only way we'll know moving forward to address the issues and problems we have throughout the state of Vermont. Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. I'll note Matthew is also a member of our Energy and Climate Committee up in Franklin, Grand Isle County. So it's good to get to see him at another meeting. Marion.
Thanks. And I think Matthew brings up a really good point. I wanted to just draw the connection between a potential ask around FY24 grant program as a result of the Municipal Vulnerability Index and tie that also to the work of the Climate Toolkit. I think those projects are together moving at a similar pace, and I'm hoping that there'll be a close connection between those two, and that municipalities can use the mapping tool of the Municipal Vulnerability Index to understand their vulnerabilities, and then existing tools in the Climate Toolkit to help identify where they can start to address those vulnerabilities. But I think myself, and I know all the folks who are on this call who are in the Toolkit task group, there's a lot of tools and resources that we're hearing would be important, or capacity building that would be important through meetings with stakeholders that don't currently exist or have barriers to access for municipalities. And at least right now, the goal of the toolkit is to highlight existing tools and resources, but there may be an opportunity through Municipal Vulnerability Index to tie that to the toolkit and say, here's where the gaps are, and here's where we may need to grow capacity building services and technical assistance for municipalities. So just want to draw that connection between those two tools, and I think hope that they can both start to highlight where those gaps are, and would encourage members of the toolkit task group to speak up too, because I know we've had a lot of conversations around those gaps, with the focus on equity too, as Matthew highlighted.
Great. These are all great suggestions and comments for where we can spend, where we might make some budget recommendations. I see Bronwyn, you have your hand up.
Hi. Two things that I wanted to point out, and one recommendation for potential budget ask. With the Municipal Vulnerability Index, I recall reading the scope. I don't know what the consultant has submitted, but I feel like I hear it talked about sometimes as though it will be identifying, the most vulnerable communities, which to some extent, when you're talking about statewide resources is, important to kind of understand relative vulnerability. I just wanted to flag that from a community's perspective. They're gonna see their vulnerability, period. And they're not necessarily gonna care if they're more or less vulnerable than another community. They're gonna want resources to deal with whatever their vulnerability is. If they're less vulnerable to flooding, but more vulnerable to drought or heat waves, then, that's gonna be important to them and they're gonna want resources to do something about that. So I just wanted to flag, I guess, that I hope that municipal vulnerability index tool can sort of be disaggregated to be useful to communities as well, even if we're trying to kind of bring it to a scale that makes it easy for the state to get some relative understanding of vulnerability. The other thing I just wanted to flag too, and this might be getting a little too far down the line, but I think it's going to come up more quickly than we expect, is to have some kind of metric that helps both the state and communities weigh options. I've been hearing a lot about using avoided costs to try and help put a common metric so that you can compare different resiliency actions. And so I'm just wondering if there may be an opportunity to just start digging into what would an avoided cost analysis look like at the state level for different sectors, for different communities, for different impacts. And if there is a framework that we can start developing for avoided costs that would then also be useful to communities as they're going through their own process of making decisions about what to address and when. So those are the two things I wanted to flag.
Great, thanks, Bronwyn. Other ideas or questions as we try to build this list of potential funding asks? Going back to statute and our responsibilities of our committee, I thought I would do a quick check on that to see if we're covered everywhere. And it does say one item is to utilize the VEM biennial reports to recommend program policy and legislative changes. Erica, I'm assuming you're all over that one and we don't need anything more, or do you? I'm not going to put you in a position of asking you if you think this committee should advocate for your agency funding, because I know that's an untenable position to put you in. So can I just ask the status of that and if you think that that's moving forward, okay?
We have not begun the biennial report compilation.
Okay.
It was really intended in the discussion with the committee at the time. It was really intended to be kind of a roll up of community ERAF status, as well as other indicators that that exist for that would inform where funding might need to go for in the biennial report. It would also talk about some of the other funding that we have leveraged through other federal funding sources.
Okay.
But the intent is really to have that available for the beginning of the biennium, and make that as a resource as they wish.
Wonderful, thank you. Chad. Yes. We'll come back to Chad.
No, I'm here.
Oh,
Sorry,
you are.
I just gotta move. I gotta move. I'm talking on my phone, but watching on my screen. But I was in a location where I shouldn't be talking. So I don't know if this is the right time to be bringing this up. And I know this is, we're talking about the budget for fiscal year 2024, but that'll be here before we know it. I guess I'm just wondering what the subcommittee's thoughts are, and if there are any resources that we can bring to bear for communities to benefit from the IRA bill that was passed into law last week. There are, we're still scrubbing it here at Encore as it relates to, solar and energy storage, but I know there are a lot of provisions in there to help communities weatherize and become more efficient from the residential level up to, commercial and larger facilities, and including some direct pay, so while without having tax liability that support a number of these different types of investments. So I guess I'm wondering if we're thinking about some type and educate communities or as to how they can most benefit from this transformational piece of legislation that finally got passed. So I don't know if this is the time to talk about it, but it just seems to me that there's so many tools within that law that can be brought to bear to help communities become more resilient and become more energy secure. So I guess I'm just wanting to bring that up, and again, not know if this is the right time to do so.
I think that's great, Chad. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Jane notes in the chat that you can't see because you're walking, Jane says that they have some great resources about that she can share, and that Vermont edition will be focusing on it next week. In addition to that, I think your point is a great one, Chad, and I wonder if are you thinking that this is something that would fit in with the overall technical assistance need with focus on this particular item as well? Or is this something separate and distinct from that?
Would be a great place for it to slot in. I just want to make sure that we are able to bring some resources to communities. We're in this every day, 9 to 5, and a lot of these communities obviously are being managed by volunteer folks. So just if we can help create some educational kind of program that can be distributed and then around the state, and that could include resources. So I don't know exactly what the vehicle is or where it goes, but it just seems like we've absolutely got to leverage, again, what is a transformational piece of legislation at the federal level.
Great. Thanks, Chad. Are there other suggestions or ideas? Yeah,
Oh.
go ahead, Ben, and then Matthew.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to offer one quick comment and sort of cautionary, which is that as we think about our investments in programs like the Flood Resilient Community Fund, for example, and statewide programs, we want to be careful not to tie it too mechanistically to the municipal vulnerability index, because Bronwyn, for example, was talking about avoided costs or return on investment or benefit cost analysis, as FEMA calls it. And the point is that the municipality is not really a true unit of measurement for resiliency. There are families and neighborhoods and valleys that have particular vulnerability in every community in the state. And there might be a very worthwhile and urgent project to be done, even in a quote unquote wealthy community. And we don't want to preclude those by tying everything to how the municipality scores. I want to make sure we don't fall into that trap. Thank you.
That's an excellent point, Ben. I hope that nothing I said suggested that led to the suggestion that that's what I was thinking, because I wasn't. It's one tool in which to help municipalities and the state look at how to focus resources, but not the be all end all. So thank you for making that point, you and Bronwyn. Matthew, you had your hand up?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, I have one. We'll circle back to, financing and funds. There's a quick or somewhat of a question in general, and there's just a broad question. Who are you trying to attract to fund these programs? For one, that's question number one. Number two is, who do we want to invest or have our investors lined up to invest in what what in each of these programs we're looking for. And 3 is how can we make the pitch or make the sale to have, these partnerships between investors and hedge funds within the state of Vermont, because everything revolves around the finance. And who are we trying to get at the table here? And who are we trying to go for at the table here? And who should we involve throughout this process moving forward? Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. I think it's a great reminder for us to always make sure we're focused on who we're trying to serve and who we're trying to involve by these decisions at the policy level. Any other further comments on potential financing recommendations for FY24? I think this has been a great discussion to give us some points that we can jot down and finalize. I only had one final question from me about statutory requirements, and that was our requirement to develop best practice recommendations specific to rural communities for reducing municipal, school district, and residential fossil fuel consumption, fortifying critical transportation, creating distributed redundant local electric system. That big random best practices recommendation statute, is some of that being covered by the toolkit, or is that something that we need to really focus on as a distinct project?
I have always read that to be both the toolkit, primarily the toolkit, but also addressed in our recommendations in the climate action plan, because that was really kind of the area of focus that we used for driving a lot of the recommendations.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really the fossil fuel use that we didn't have a lot of recommendations on, but I think we thought that was going to be incorporated into the toolkit. And is that true, Marion?
Yeah, the toolkit will have a focus on existing energy programs, fuel switching, as it relates to like all of the energy planning municipalities do. And we're actually thinking of breaking it down into the requirements from Act 174, the Municipal Energy Planning Act. Again, it'll be existing tools and resources. So if we want to build that out and think about developing new best practices, that may be something that down the line we may want to look at additional funding. So I think good to flag. I think some of it will be part of the toolkit. And yes, Matthew, equity is part of the toolkit as well, if that's what your question was. We'll have a focus on equity tools and resources, again, that exists currently in the state, which I'll admit the state's sort of learning about equity in terms of climate action as we go. So hoping we can really build that out, but we are trying to center that as a key component of the toolkit.
Great, thank you. So we'll take these and create a series of recommendations that will be the initial part of the conversation at the Climate Council meeting in early September. I said December, sorry, skipped Halloween. Don't mean to do that. So early September.
Yeah, I can summarize some of these recommendations. I'll send them to you, Catherine, just to.
Okay, and I have my notes too, so we'll compare.
Yeah, and then we can send it out to the rest of the subcommittee for comment.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Great discussion. I think we're ready to move to the next agenda item, which is subcommittee composition and 2022 meeting schedule. So a couple of notes here. I'm going to cover the first one, and then I'm going to hand it over to Catherine to cover the second one, if that's okay with you, Catherine. So the first one is, Marion talked about her transition to the climate office and the help me, Marion, it's the resilience and adaptation
coordinator.
Queen. Okay, coordinator.
Close enough.
So just with the establishment of the climate office is really, I think, important. And what I would propose is that we have representation from the climate office as official membership on this subcommittee. Up until now, Marion has been providing a lot of the support to the subcommittee, but I think it's really appropriate at this point to invite her and hopefully with the approval of her boss, Jane, to join us actually as a full member and, not have to do some of that support work, but, it changes the dynamic, and she adds so much to our subcommittee She has fantastic expertise in this area, and she would really bring the connection of the climate office to the subcommittee in a more official way. Not that it wasn't official before, but in a more equitable way, I think, too. And so that is what I'm proposing. I wonder if there are any thoughts. I know it's awkward because she's sitting right here, but I didn't think it would be too awkward because I thought it would be pretty easy decision. But maybe what I will do is we will, if folks, we are at 14 members now. We are not, we're trying to keep it in that range, but we are also at a point where we are not writing a climate plan. We have a few projects that subgroups of the subcommittee are working on. So it's really important that we have the subject matter expertise in the room regularly. So I wonder if there are any concerns or if folks would feel more comfortable. I can propose that, leave it on the table, and then we can take that up at our next meeting, however we want to work that. Okay, well, what we'll do is let's mull that over, and if there are any concerns, folks can email myself and Catherine to the off to the side. If we don't have any concerns, we will take it up at the next meeting and we can take a vote. I don't think we had to vote on our other ones, so I'm trying to remember. That's why I'm a little fumbling this. I remember if
I think we
voted.
did it by consensus the last time.
Yeah.
We didn't take any formal votes. And I'll just note that if we add Marion, oh, Mike's giving a thumbs up. Adding Marion won't change our quorum because we're at 14, so we need 8. If we go to 15, we still need 8. So it doesn't make it any harder to get a quorum.
I think she's been a member anyway, so to me, it's.
It's kind of a no-brainer. Okay, we'll take that up at the next meeting. Feel free to email Catherine and I if you have any concerns after the meeting.
And we'll put it as a formal agenda item, so it will be something we notice as an actual decision we'll be making.
Yep. Okay, thank you. I'll hand it over to Catherine.
I just wanted to let folks know that my term is up in October. I'm one of the 2-year appointees by the Speaker of the House, and I have let the Speaker know that I will not want to be reappointed. So I think it's time to, bring in another leadership to represent municipal interests, which is what my role is. So if you know of people who you think might be an outstanding municipal representative to be an official member of the Climate Council, it's a great opportunity to let the Speaker know that some great folks who might serve in that role. I think it's been a great couple of years, but it's really good to get new voices and new leadership in the effort. So I will miss being on the Climate Council and being official co-chair of this committee. I did mention to Erica and Marion and Jane that if the committee so chooses, I'm happy to continue to serve as a member of the committee, or at minimum, a member of the task group working on the Municipal Vulnerability Index. So I'll definitely continue to stay involved at least a little bit. And you will need a new co-chair. There will be a slate of new speaker appointees. I think most of the speakers appointees with the 2-year terms have been not asked to be reappointed. So there'll be a bunch of new appointees. The traditional approach has been for their subcommittee chairs to have one administration person and one speaker or Senate, one House or Senate appointee. So in terms of, not that you have to follow that, but that's been the general approach. And so just be thinking about that as we think to the next steps.
Well, I just want to publicly thank Catherine for all of your work over the last 2 years. We have definitely been partners in, I wouldn't say crime, but partners in climate. And it really wouldn't have been successful without you and your leadership. we definitely will miss you as a co-chair.
Thank you. I will miss being co-chair sometimes. And it's been, I think, the committee, we've got such a great committee that it really has made this work so much better than it could have been otherwise. It's been great.
It really, I mean, when we put together recommendations for the climate action plan, I mean, it was a matter of how do we ensure that we get everything versus how can we nix some of these. It was not confrontational in this.
Yeah, it was great. I've learned a lot from so many members of this committee. It's been great.
So Jane or Marianne, do you know, I think the way that it works is would the council make the appointment for a co-chair for the subcommittee, or how does that generally work?
Actually we haven't lost a legislative appointment yet, co-chair. So there have been transitions with administrative co-chairs, executive branch co-chairs, but I'm not, I mean, the process will be, the way it worked out was we asked all counselors to serve on one subcommittee at the beginning. And then the process roadmap, which was the document that articulated how the structure and setup of the subcommittees and more, spoke to having the subcommittees co-chaired by one legislatively appointed counselor for balance. The new roster is of counselors this fall. I will say that, well, one, I just want to add my appreciation for Catherine too. You've been a pleasure to work with and certainly have held us accountable to making the process better. And it is a richer plan having had you engaged. So thank you. And I will say that I think I'm curious to see how this all transitions this fall. I encouraged some counselors when I spoke to Chris and Liz Miller and Chris Campany, who are the House appointed steering committee members. We spoke briefly just about raising up the awareness about this transition happening and the timing of it, largely because the council hasn't met in months. And we're going into a fall with a big agenda for the council again for 4 months. And so I'm not sure how many counselors are stepping down in October or how many are going to ask to be reappointed through December and then step down. Like, it's going to be an interesting few months to see how it all kind of shakes out. But yeah, and then we'll do it again next year with the Senate appointees. So so that they, and then for folks who don't know this, the House members were appointed for initial 2-year terms, but these next House members will be appointed for 3-year terms because it was intended so that not all House and Senate appointments step down at the same time, but now they'll be equal in serving every 3 years for 3-year terms. So anyway, we're in a transition phase and we'll see how it goes, but I expect a counselor who is new in the space, especially someone who's representing municipalities, will likely be interested in serving on this subcommittee, and we'll have to just do a good job of setting expectations so they know what they're getting into.
Thanks, Jane. Okay, any questions or thoughts about subcommittee composition? Okay, so for the meetings, just as a reminder for folks, we have a monthly meeting booked on our calendar, and we just keep the appointment, and then generally the week before the meeting, touch base on. It has been Marianne and Catherine and I, but I guess it's going to be myself, and I'll just talk to myself.
Well, I'll talk to you next month, then that'll be it.
About just if there are agenda items, or is it worth just doing an update, via email. There are a lot of meetings that can be emails, so we don't want to have more meetings that can be emails. And so that's generally how we've been running the meetings. Between this meeting and our next scheduled time, the Climate Council will be meeting. So I expect at a minimum there will be updates from the Climate Council to be sharing with the subcommittee. Marion?
Yeah, I was just gonna add, I think in the short term, planning on having a Roselands meeting September 23rd, because as Jane outlined, the sort of process that the steering committee laid out was for the council to meet, for subcommittees to come up with these general ideas for budget to include in the memo, for the council to meet on the 12th, and to come up with potentially some, kind of like we did with ARPA, some funding targets or some sort of guideposts for developing costs or requested amounts for the budget items. So there may need to be some follow-up with the subcommittees after the September council meeting in advance of the October council meeting. So I think we'll know more after the council meeting in September, but just flagging that that's likely going to come up in the next month.
Thanks, Marion.
Thanks.
Are there any other topic areas or items that folks would like to cover before we go to public comment? Okay, well, we'll invite the members of the public to speak up and share their thoughts at this time. Matthew?
Yes, this is a thought and, a suggestion moving forward, with the, recommendations and suggestions, where do we see ourselves, 10, 20, 15 years from now with the success of this program moving forward and helping, 252 towns, to accommodate, their specific needs and their issues throughout, Vermont. Because that's like a question, but a suggestion and a comment. And what do you see, moving forward? And this is the insight part. What do you see moving forward, with what we're doing here? Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew, for the reminder about what the long-term priorities are. Appreciate that. Any other public comment? Okay. Well, with that, unless there are any other items, entertain a motion to adjourn. Got a wave. Okay. In a second, and a third. Okay, thanks everybody.
Thanks,
Have a great
everyone.
weekend.
Bye-bye.